I don't know if I can honestly say that I know precisely why. The philosophical topics started to emerge for me very early in my life. I can give you a couple of examples. Once I was sitting in a train station when I was only 11, and I looked out, and there were these people milling around, and it occurred to me, if someone were to write a biography of them, would they have to include the fact that I was looking at them? And I concluded no. Their lives are independent of my having perceived them. And this was just an infantile philosophical notion, but it turned out later on when I entered philosophy, it looked very familiar to me because indeed it was a major issue, kind of are we like Berkeleyites, you know? Is reality what it's perceived, or is it there and then it's perceived? And very early I was thinking about things like that. Also I was thinking about other things like I was lying in a meadow once, and I was looking up in the middle of the night, and I saw this incredible star-filled sky, and I thought, now if I were on that star that I'm looking at, and I was looking in the same direction, and then there's another star, and so, and then I thought, it looks like this world is infinite. And that sort of boggled my mind. And then I said, well, I think I'll just worry about where I am because it's too far. I started to be, I think everybody dabbles in almost any field because human beings don't grow up as specialists. They grow up as generalists. They do a little biology, a little physics, a little, whatever. And then eventually they gravitate in some direction, and some people become enthusiastic and avid about it and devote themselves to a study of a certain area. And I found the attraction in studying basic issues so great that it's energized me forever. And I have never had any regrets about my career path. It was just the right thing, And I don't know what else to say except that it seems like a fit. Now, I'm sure my detractors would think that it was a very bad fit. And then, of course, when I ran across Ayn Rand later when I was in the Air Force, I had not yet gone to college, and I actually was a player in the night of January 16th, which we put on in a little player group that I helped found, the Andrews Players at Andrews Air Force Base near Washington. Already there were some inklings of philosophy because remember the play ends leaving it open to the selected jury from the audience to decide which way to go, guilty or not guilty. And that's not a normal way a play plays out. And so it tickled my fancy, although I never knew who Ayn Rand was or anything. Then later on what happened is there were two guys I was very close to in the Air Force, and they were very avid about Rand, and I didn't know anything about her. But I ran across a review that Gore Vidal had written for the New Intellectual. I don't remember what the forum was, but he dissed the thing and made some reference to the fact that Ayn Rand was very opposed to Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount and so on. And I walked up to these two cats and said, hey, your hero really got beaten up by Gore Vidal. And one of them turned to me and said, now, wait a minute, did you ever read Rand? And I said, no. And I said, well, but before you conclude that Gore Vidal did such a fabulous job on her, you might want to read her. And that looked like a reasonable idea to me. And so I read The Fountainhead. And the rest is history, because so many ideas in The Fountainhead were attractive, both personally, psychologically, but also philosophically. I was very taken. I was struggling with the idea of God because I was a Roman Catholic. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and I was beginning to find it very difficult to stomach the stuff. I didn't understand what the hell angels were. I was completely confounded by the whole idea of original sin, and then the whole confession bit made no sense to me, especially since once I went to confession and I said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, and I promise I won't sin again." And then I remembered I had a date on Monday night, and I told him, he says, "I just told you a lie because I think I want to sin on Monday." And the man said to me, "Well, just promise me for now." And I thought, well, wait a minute, a promise can't be for now. It's a future-oriented thing, you know. So I noticed I was beginning to be very critical of my sort of religious convictions, if they were that. And then Rand comes on the scene with, I vaguely remember some line in The Fountainhead about how the idea of God is an insult to my intelligence or something like that. And it resonated with me tremendously. And so I started to look into Rand, and then I read Atlas Shrugged, and I cut out Galt's speech, and I postponed reading the whole thing until I finished the novel. And then we started to study, the three of us, those two guys and I, started to study Galt's speech. And we were very, very concerned that we might be taken in by some scam. We didn't trust anybody. We were just thinking maybe this woman is just, let's really comb through all the arguments as well as we can. And we did, and she managed to withstand almost all the criticisms that we had. We even came up with the idea that maybe the Soviets sent her over to discredit capitalism by associating it with atheism. We tried every angle. And then I started to go to night school and take philosophy courses. Plato, Descartes, William James, the whole slew of them from ancient to modern. And I always used these guys to criticize Rand and to see if Rand could withstand that criticism. Because I didn't just want to fall for the good language and the dramatic story and so on. And to the best of my thinking, Rand managed to pass. Better than most. Better than many of the major philosophers. Like I never understood why anybody took Descartes seriously, even though later on I kind of understood. So, yeah, I got interested in philosophy and stuck by it. I've never found it to be anything but the best decision in my life. Well, I was born in 1939, which was 6 months before the Second World War broke out. I was born in March. The war broke out in September. And I was very aware of the war as I grew up as a kid. By the time I reached 4, we were watching bombings going on. I was running down to, escape the bombings in the middle of Budapest. And then what happened, for a while we were in limbo. After the war ended in 1945, we didn't know whether we were going to go with the West or with the East. Hungarians as a nation, and maybe even as an ethnic group, had always had some resentment toward the Russians. And that came from the fact that in 1848, when the Hungarians had an uprising against the Austro-Hungarian emperor, the Russians were called in to defeat this. And so they lost because of the Russians, and they kind of never forgave them as a group for this. So even apart from communism, and apart from the Soviet side of Russia, Russia has never sat very well with many Hungarians. And so you were sort of prepped not to be terribly welcoming of them. So we were always hoping that the West would get us. But Yalta basically did away with that wish. And then in 1948, the commies stole the election. They literally went out and beat up anybody who opposed them, physically beat up people at the polls. My uncle was one of them, and took over. And that, ever since then, Hungary became a puppet state for the Soviets. And everything changed. All education became indoctrination. We were taught nothing but Marxism from elementary to high school. We were we were induced to despise the bourgeoisie. Anything that smacked of business or capitalism or money was derided as evil, and not just evil, but destructive and everything. And most people who had a little bit of memory, or had parents who had memory, did not find this convincing. Even though they may not have been very satisfied with previous regimes, this was not the answer. So I became quite avid in my skepticism. And even when I was only 11, I would raise my hands in class and start coming up with objections to, for example, the Marxist slogan, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. I challenged by saying, suppose my friend here next to me and I start with the same amount of money, and he buys some wood and I buy some wine, and by the end of the week he has built a table and I am lying under the table drunk. Now, does he have to share the advantages that having built that table gained for him? Now, they immediately called in my mother and protested that I was of a counter-revolutionary mentality. And they took me out of a educational program that was supposed to land me in high school and eventually in college, and put me into a technical school, because there you wouldn't have any influence on anybody's ideas other than technical how-to issues.